Yipee-Ki-Yay, Mr. Falcon.
Welcome back to Yippee-Ki-Yay, Mr. Falcon. This is part 2 of our deep dive into the Hannibal Lecter film series. Call it a franchise if you will. If you do, it's a discombobulated one. We got pretty far in the first episode, but didn't get all the way. We still have an entire show to talk about a little bit. So just to make it a little more digestible for you. You see that? That's a cannibal joke. You get it? We broke it into 2 episodes. So here's part 2. We get started with Red Dragon, the second adaptation of the novel by the same name by Thomas Harris, who created the character of Hannibal Lecter. The first adaptation was in 1986, and it was called Manhunter. After the sequel to Silence of the Lambs was released, entitled Hannibal, they scrambled to make another film that could use Anthony Hopkins in the role while he was still young enough to play it. Again, was he really young enough to play it? Super debatable. We'll get into that. So here we are, starting with Red Dragon on our deep dive examination of the Hannibal Lecter film series. We have two more movies. We have another movie to shit on here.
I can't wait.
Two more. So here, this one's fresh in your mind. Red Dragon. This came after Hannibal. Hannibal came out in 2001. It did pretty good because, I mean, you know, Hannibal Lecter again was this big pop culture phenomenon, and nobody had gotten any Hannibal for 10 years almost. So everybody went to go see it, and everyone was kind of like, it's all right. You know, plus the controversy over the ending got some meat in the seats. So it did okay. So I guess while Anthony Hopkins was young enough, and while there was still the momentum of the Hannibal movie, they figured they would get another Hannibal Lecter movie out of him, and they readapted Red Dragon, supposedly more faithful to the book, with more big names. Like we've said already, Ed Norton played Will Graham this time. They got Keitel as Crawford. Mary Louise Parker plays Mrs. Graham. And, of course, we've got what the fuck is his name? Voldemort. Fucking Ralph Fiennes.
Ray Fiennes, yeah.
Yeah, Ray Fiennes. My bad. He's playing the Tooth Fairy / Red Dragon this time. And Hopkins comes back as Lecter. But the problem is, this movie, this story takes place before Silence of the Lambs. So you have Anthony Hopkins, who is now aged 11 years since Lambs, playing a character who's supposed to be 6 years younger than he was in Lambs. But I think they fuck with that. I think we're meant to believe in this movie, in Red Dragon, that the events of that movie take place like in 1990 because of how it ends. It's a terrible ending. It's the dumbest fucking ending. But it ends with them telling. You didn't watch it to the end, right? Did you see the end?
I ran out of time.
Kids, man. You and your kids. How dare you love your children?
Yeah, it's a flaw.
That's ridiculous. Yeah, you should make them sit on the curb and wait while you finish watching.
I'm going to let them watch Red Dragon at a young age and not fuck them up at all.
Well, it ends. Hold on, give me a second. Where was I? I lost it.
Where it ends. Like, I know the Tooth Fairy he's got the girl in the house and he's going to light it on fire because he doesn't want the dragon to get her.
Wait. So it ends after the attack at Will Graham's house is foiled. Tooth Fairy's dead. Hannibal's still in jail. He's still in the asylum, right? But, you remember the orderly, Barney?
I remember Barney.
From Silence. Yeah, he's in Silence of the Lambs. He's in Hannibal, and he's also in Red Dragon. So I lied earlier.
You know what other movie Barney's in?
No, what?
Manhunter.
He's in Manhunter. Holy shit.
Frankie Faison's in Manhunter.
That's right. He's the police chief in one of the towns?
In the
Where
end,
the murder?
when they land in like Missouri. He's in it for like a second. He's like, all right, let's go. And they get in the squad cars.
That's funny. That's funny. I mean, props to Red Dragon for having Bill Duke in a small role, I guess.
Yeah.
From Predator. He was Mac in Predator, and he's just fucking awesome. But
sorry to derail you.
No, it ends with him. It ends with Lecter in his cell, and Barney tells him that there's a young FBI agent here to see him. And he asks, "What's her name?" And that's how it ends.
Yeah, and we're meant to believe that they happen one right after the other.
But, I mean, I guess technically we don't know when that scene takes place because Anthony Hopkins is 900 years old and he's playing 500 years old. So it doesn't really matter. There's no time. But, yeah, it was a really half-assed attempt to try to tie it to Silence of the Lambs. And I hated it. I hated that ending. I don't know. I've seen this movie a decent number of times, and I don't really like it.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You read the book, right? So
yeah,
the Tooth Fairy in both Manhunter and Red Dragon, they're pretty different. You know, they have like the same MO in terms of like what the guy does, and it's almost like shot for shot between the two movies when he's going between he's looking
that's
at
all in the book,
the crime scenes, and he's piecing it together. But then you get to the end, and in Manhunter they don't even mention the Red Dragon, and he grabs the blind girl, Reba, I think. Reba McLean, her name is. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And he starts this relationship. And in Manhunter, he brings her back to his house. And he's like, I'm gonna kill this one. And he's going to do the mirror thing. And he's getting ready to do it. And William Peterson comes like leaping through the plate glass window to save her. And he's trying to kill her because he's bad. And then you get Ray Fiennes' version of the Tooth Fairy, and he's like having this internal fight with the dragon, and he's like, no, you can't have her, it'll be better this way. And he's almost like, in his mind, he's trying to save her, and it's and he goes to burn the house. It's totally different. So like, which one's closer to the book?
The Red Dragon, the Ed Norton Red Dragon movie is that ending is pretty much how the book ended.
Because it makes no sense to me. You know, he just, all of a sudden, he's like, I like you, so I'm going to save you with a shotgun to the face so that you don't die this other way that's going to hurt a little more.
Well, like, okay. He does, in the book and in Red Dragon, the movie, he has this struggle. He thinks two things are happening at the same time because he's insane. He thinks he's transforming into the Red Dragon from the Blake painting, and B, that also the Red Dragon is an outside entity that is stalking him. That's like can exert real influence over the world through him. I don't know if he thinks it's possessing him or what, if that's the whole deal. Like eventually it will possess him all the time. But the thing is, he genuinely falls for this Reva woman. He actually falls in love with her. It's the first person he ever had feelings for in his entire life, and it fucks up his whole serial killer vibe, man. So he actually got to a point where he was trying to stop killing, and he had stopped. He'd put it on pause, and he was about to I mean, depending on how you want to look at it, he was about to hang up his spurs.
Yeah, because
Or try to.
he destroys the painting.
He destroys the painting in an effort to save himself, in an effort to what he thinks is to stop what's causing him to kill, this manifestation of this painting. So when he sees what he thinks he sees Reba cheating on him with that dude from work.
Oh yeah,
outside of her
creep.
place. Now she's blind. Reba's blind, by the way. Did we not mention the fucking fact that Reba's blind?
Yeah, she works in the dark room.
It's kind of important because that's how he's able to bring her to his creepy serial killer fuck lair without her seeing any of the creepy shit that's around, which is also kind of a terrifying scene in every adaptation of this. I forget which. I think it's the Red Dragon one. They do this a little bit better. She's in the bathroom and there's like the jar with his creepy
teeth,
murder teeth. Yeah, which are you are led to believe are his grandmother's dentures or something. It's fucking gross. Which is it's such a Thomas Harris touch. But they didn't have that in Manhunter, I don't think. But you know, the fact that she's blind is really important. But he sees her betraying him. What he thinks is she's not even. That's the funniest part. She was being totally innocent about it with this scumbag from work who's always hitting on her. And he fucking snaps. He just fucking snaps and he goes and shoots the guy in the head. He just literally he's watching this all happen in the street, gets out of the van, walks up, shoots him in the head, and then absconds with her back to his house. So I think that was the break. I think he just gave in and decided he was going to go on a spree. He destroying the painting didn't help. You know, the reason he tried to is gone and betrayed him. And instead of killing them both there, which he may have planned to do, who knows? That might have been his original plan. He had the extra body and he set up a ruse, faking his own death, at least long enough for him to get to Will Graham's house in Florida and try to kill him. And it worked. It worked. And Will finds out like right before, and he does fuck him up real bad. So yeah, you know, that's how it played out in the book.
That's in the book.
In the movie. Yeah, yeah. And I mean, most of that's in the movie. You could read it. You got to read a little bit into it, but I mean, that's how it all happens. It actually happens the same way in Manhunter too.
What which part? Yeah, he sees. I like that a little better though because it's a little more believable. Like that guy, the guy that he sees her with is not being a shit. He just takes her home because she's blind. And
right.
He's like, oh, and he goes, you got something in your hair. And then he goes to like pull something out of her hair, and then you see what Tom Noonan's Tooth Fairy is seeing, and they're like bathed in light, and it goes to slow-mo, and it looks like they're sharing this like passionate, and it looks like a hallucination, which makes you feel like, oh god, yeah, this guy's like unhinged. And then when Ray Fiennes sees it, like the guy really does go to give her an unwanted kiss on her cheek, and to him it seems like, you know, she's into it, but it's not nearly as like as much of a hallucination as the other one. And like Tom Noonan, oh god, what a creep. Because even when he's like, Ray Fiennes seems
so
like
scary looking.
He's coming apart. He's like, no, I can't. I like her. She's nice, you know, and which is so different from Tom Noonan. Like when William Peterson leaps through the window, Tom Noonan's face just goes like blank. And he just like he grabs him by the neck and he's trying to cut him up with a broken mirror. And he goes like,
he cuts him a bunch of times too. He fucks him up,
slashes him up.
He cuts his face, like, and yeah, that was in the book too. Graham gets fucked up at the end. He gets like his face. They don't really go into it, but apparently his face is really fucking scarred, real bad after that. And Tom Noonan. Okay, so in the book Dollarhide, everyone's going to get confused. Francis Dollarhide is the Tooth Fairy, is the Red Dragon. All the same dude, Francis Dollarhide.
That's the character.
That's the character's name. In Manhunter, in the Tom Noonan version, they decided to make him really tall and imposing that way, right? Because Tom Noonan is a giant. He played Frankenstein in the excellent Monster Squad, is what I first ever saw him in. He was the, oh God, what was his name? He was the comical bad guy in Last Action Hero with the axes.
I forget his name.
Something like that. Yeah, like
with the rain slicker.
Yeah, the yellow rain slicker and the crazy hair and the big exaggerated fake teeth. But he's a weird looking dude. But he's been a character actor for years and years. He's very young in this, very young, but he's a very strange looking cat. In the book, Dollarhide was a bodybuilder. And they did that a little bit in Red Dragon. You see, Rafe, you see that version of Dollarhide lifting weights a couple times in his house while he's like, I don't know, talking to himself in his grandmother's voice or some crazy shit with a stocking on his head. He's a fucking nut. But in the book, like, he was jacked in the book. Like, it was often repeated that he was, you know, he was like a legit, like, could have been a bodybuilder jacked. So they didn't really do that in either version, which is kind of weird to me. Unless it was just a casting thing. Because, I mean, Ray Fiennes did a great job. I think he did, with what he had to work with, I think he did okay. He was definitely weird, definitely creepy, but not as creepy as Tom Noonan.
Tom Noonan was scary.
Yeah. Yeah, watching him flip that switch was pretty cool. And it happens so fast, though, in that movie. Like, that movie really feels like they ran out of money and they just careened to the end, you know? Also, we have to mention Philip Seymour Hoffman as Freddie Lounds.
He was
Red
great.
Dragon. What a bright spot in an otherwise mediocre film. I mean, his performance is, as always, is unique. It's weird, and like, you can smell him. Like his character smells like sweat and cheeseburger wrappers and greasy hair and just shittiness, just shitty personness.
The slouch.
Yeah, dude, the body language, how he just pushes his gut out, you know, just the way he's just so smarmy. He's so greasy, man. He's so fucking greasy. And his visit with the Tooth Fairy is funny. I mean, it's not funny, but it's fucking whew. It's a memorable scene. I think it's the scariest scene in that movie, and that's not a very scary movie, but that's the most upsetting because I think he gave such a good performance, him and Fiennes, in that scene.
And it's the most menacing version of the Tooth Fairy you get in that movie, because like the rest of it, he's having like this internal battle, you know, when he's trying to spare the girl. But in that scene, he's like, "Oh, you're gonna do exactly what." And he's like, "Look at me." Yeah, it's pretty creepy.
So, if for anyone who doesn't know, this is the main serial killer dude, Dollarhide, the Red Dragon. He abducts this tabloid reporter who the FBI uses as a pawn to plant this fake story that says all kinds of nasty shit about the Tooth Fairy, his alternate serial killer persona. So he decides to kidnap him. He glues him to a wheelchair, naked, and shows him a little slideshow of all of his victims, the families he's killed so far. And then he shows him his giant entire back of his body tattoo, and scares the shit out of him and makes him record like an apology on tape. And then he like bites off pieces of his face and his tongue, and then sets him on fire in the wheelchair and rolls him down a fucking hill into the parking garage of the tabloid where he worked, the Tatler, the National Tatler.
Gnarly.
And that happens. They apparently they filmed a version of that for Manhunter, and he had the back tattoo and everything, but they cut it. when they cut all the Red Dragon stuff. So all you see is him abduct Lowndes, and then you see him coming down on the wheelchair on fire.
Yeah, it's a long scene still. He makes him read the thing on tape.
Yeah.
And
there's some of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and he still makes, he's got that creep. That's when he has the stocking on his face. Tom Noonan does.
Yeah.
He's just wearing that stocking over his nose.
That was a thing in the book too. That was his thing when he killed people. When he went killing, he wore a black stocking on his face, and we never actually see him do that in the movie. But yeah, Noonan wears it a bit more than Fiennes did, and it's striking. It has a striking effect. It's fucking creepy. They should have went with it more in Red Dragon, I think. But whatever, man. I mean, Red Dragon is what it is. It was another chapter. If you wanted it, it was getting to see Anthony Hopkins play his iconic role one last time. And yes, that is the last time he suited up as Hannibal Lecter. And that's a good thing, because he's too old. It doesn't play. And again, you get a movie that feels like neither Demi's Silence of the Lambs or like Ridley Scott's Hannibal. It's just, I don't know. What does it feel like, man? Like, Red Dragon is...
It feels...
It looks good.
No, it feels like
generic?
A cash grab. Yeah, it's just... like I think you said earlier.
There it is.
It feels real cookie cutter, and it's got that long, hyper stylized credit roll where they're showing the headlines from the Hannibal Lecter
from his
case.
scrapbook.
Yeah, from his scrapbook, and it just feels forced. They were just trying to like you said earlier. They had all this momentum going. They had some people under contract. They had Anthony Hopkins. They're like, yeah, let's make another one. Let's just make another one. That's the impression I got.
Yeah, I have a hard time arguing with that. That's how it feels. That's how it was. I mean, it came out a year later.
That was Brett Ratner, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, and it makes sense too from their point of view, because what do you do with a writer who takes a decade between writing books, right? You've got the momentum of Hannibal, you've got the actor right now, and you've got the Silence of the Lambs fan base, which is still going to movies, who will probably see this at some point, either, if not in theaters, they're probably going to rent it, Like, what do you do? Well, there's this lesser known Hannibal Lecter book that was only made into this weird Michael Mann fucking Technicolor shit shingle in the 80s. Let's just do that again, because no one remembers it anyway. And then everyone started renting Manhunter.
Right, yeah.
Which is
I didn't know what it was.
But I mean, it's worth seeing, right? Manhunter it's something. It's interesting.
I'm glad I watched it. I liked it better than Red Dragon. It's definitely got more interesting characters in it. Like, I like that version of Will Graham better than Ed Norton's Boy Scout. I like that version of Dollarhide better than Ray Fiennes. And like, Ray Fiennes was good. I just thought Tom Noonan was creepier. If you're going to be scared of a killer, he was pretty scary. And I don't like Harvey Keitel. You could have put anybody in that role, and it wouldn't have mattered. But for some reason, I find something a little amusing about Dennis Farina. He's just the way he's like, okay, come on, we got to get back to Quantico right now, okay? Get this guy on the phone.
New York accent.
I think it's Chicago. It sounds like a Chicago accent.
Is he a Chicago guy?
I don't know, but I
haven't seen him in anything in a while.
Okay, everybody get on this right now. We got to get this thing back. And it's totally different from the Jack Crawford you get in Silence of the Lambs, who seems like a very smart guy that knows how to solve those kind of crimes. Whereas like Dennis Farina is just barking like a cop, like it's an episode of Law and Order that he just got the wrong script.
Yeah, I mean, I accidentally mentioned Mindhunter earlier, and I mean, now I think of Jack Crawford, the Silence of the Lambs Jack Crawford, as like an amalgam of the two main characters from Mindhunter. You know, I feel like he's, an ex-Marine with a psychology degree.
Well, he pretty much is. Like a lot of those
Yeah.
books are based on like the real guy. What's his name? John Douglas, I think.
Mm-hmm.
The one who wrote like Killer Across the Table and wrote Mindhunter. I mean, yeah, like that's who Jack Crawford seems like. He's just trying to understand the mind of these killers and the
well, that's his role, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they started the behavioral science unit at the FBI, and he runs it in the books, and that was the heyday of it was in the 80s.
The guy that wrote those books was heavily involved in the making of Silence of the Lambs. Like he was on as a consultant. He got him access to Quantico to do the filming, and he talked to the director about a lot of creative choices that they made for Buffalo Bill, who was a great bad guy.
Yeah, and that dedication just it shows in the final product, because the other books are just literally adaptations of the other movies. Are literally just adaptations of the books with very little extra to go into it. And I mean, nothing against Harris again, but he researched what he researched. Who knows how good his research was for the books? But when you do what they did when they made Lambs, to make it that authentic from both ends, from the FBI side, and like you just said, Buffalo Bill is an amalgam of real serial killers, just like Jack Crawford is an amalgam of FBI personnel who started and ran the behavioral sciences unit when they were just they came up with the term serial killer that didn't exist before them. And it was they were the profilers. They were the people who were figured out how to try to catch serial killers, and it's become highly mythologized, to this day. But it was really cool shit, and it makes great fodder for movies. But going that extra mile and making it feel real, and it's also this really cool time capsule of the FBI too, from the early 90s, because it's a different animal today. But they were still training with revolvers, and it was still, kind of this transitional FBI from the transitioning from the Hoover years, through the 80s, and the hostage rescue team was the big deal, and they were the hot shots, and the FBI had a weird identity until this movie, and for better or for worse, people started associating, the FBI with, in the 90s, you associated the FBI with serial killers, catching serial killers, and the X-Files, pretty much. And, that was their pop culture identity for a while. I don't know what I'm talking about.
That's fair. No, that's fair. No, yeah, it definitely colors the way you thought of the FBI. Before that, what year did Die Hard come out?
88.
Yeah. Okay. So
88,
yeah. So before that, you had Die Hard, and you got the bumbling cops on the scene, and then like the FBI shows up, and they're like, okay, we're taking over this crime scene. This is our investigation now. You block this road, and they just start barking. Like that's what you thought of when you thought of the FBI. These guys that would just come in and push around the local cops and claim jurisdiction. And then you're right, it changed when you had Silence of the Lambs come out, and like, no, they were like the experts that would go around and help, catch these guys that had up to that point eluded capture and were outsmarting people. It was a noticeable shift.
And I'm sure the FBI itself had something to do with that, because, they offer support to projects that paint them in a positive light, right? And in the real world, in the 1990s, the FBI was known for things like Ruby Ridge and Waco. So they had a real PR problem in the 90s. So I'm sure they threw some quiet support, and behind projects like Silence of the Lambs, like the X-Files, like anything that would depict them as being slayers of evil rather than burning down compounds filled with people of questionable criminality. So yeah, rock and roll, man, that's great. But hey, Hannibal and Red Dragon, as much as they may have been cash grabs, they were nothing compared to the final cash grab. There was one more movie in this series.
Yeah, I actually haven't seen
Rising.
this one.
No, Hannibal Rising was released in 2007, and again, a direct adaptation of Harris's final Hannibal Lecter book, which was published in 2006. So just a year after the book came out, they shat this movie out. I read the book. It's an origin story for Hannibal Lecter. You know what I hate more than fucking anything?
What?
I hate when you have a great character who has a really cool backstory shrouded in mystery that you've gotten little bits and pieces of, enough that you make this really cool headcanon of what his backstory may have been. And then you get some fucking writer who thinks he has the authority just because he invented the character, has the authority to go and give him an official backstory. You know why? Because it's going to fucking suck.
Tell me.
No matter what he did, it was going to suck. Because Hannibal Lecter shouldn't have a fucking backstory. He shouldn't have a full-on novelized origin story from when he was a child through his teenage years. Like, Jesus Christ, man. It was so tedious. They get this guy, this unknown dude, to play young Hannibal Lecter. His name's Gaspard Ulliel. He hasn't really been in anything since, and he's only in European movies. You get the feeling he learned his lines phonetically, and he nothing about this dude's face looks like it could age into anything resembling Anthony Hopkins, which pisses me off because they went through so much effort to shove him down our throat as Hannibal Lecter by cranking out these 2 fucking movies with him in it. Like Hollywood's like, here, this is Hannibal Lecter, and then we're gonna cast this dude with this long angular face and a voice that's like 8 octaves deeper than Anthony Hopkins. And he's a mute for like half the movie. He doesn't speak. He doesn't fucking speak. And then when he starts speaking, it's just these awful cliched lines that are supposed to be menacing, and the book was the same way. I mean, I don't know how you fuck this up. Like, you've got World War II, you've got cannibalism, you've got fucking hunting down Nazi collaborators. Like, that's the thing. When you're reading a Hannibal Lecter novel, do you really think about like spies and intrigue and it's so strange. It was a story that just didn't need to be told. In abstract, hinting that, Hannibal Lecter is the descendant of a once noble family in Austria, and during World War II, something happened, yada, 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 he ate his sister.
Is that really what happened?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, man, that's what happened. His parents get killed in, I think a fucking plane strafes a field and kills his parents. They're on the run from the Nazis. They're in this cottage that they owned in the country. And this band of Nazi collaborators, who are basically just criminals, happen upon this cottage. The Soviets are coming. It's crazy shit all over the place. So they hole up in this cottage with Hannibal and his little, like, 4-year-old sister, maybe. She might even be 3. She's little. And he's a little kid. and they run out of food, and it's really fucking cold, and these guys apparently can't hunt, and the little girl gets sick. So, since they can't travel, we risk of getting caught, they just eat the kid.
Who's that? Who else?
It's like 5 dudes. It's like 5 dudes that are in this criminal gang of Nazi collaborators.
And he eats his own sister.
He's like half dying from starvation and shit, and they feed him broth from the stew they made from his sister.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, and then he doesn't find that shit out till like the end of the story. And neither does the audience. Like,
so
it's all shrouded in mystery.
There's a guy that's still around. It's like, oh yeah, by the way, that soup we gave you at the beginning.
Yeah.
This
is how it goes.
That was your sister.
This is how it goes. The Russians find the cottage. The planes start flying overhead, and they start bombing the area. The bad guys run away. One of them goes back to get the bag of dog tags that they hid, and then the cottage collapses on him and kills him. Hannibal, all alone, wanders off into the snow. Soviet army takes him in, sends him to a boarding school. Meanwhile, the criminals escape. They go their various ways, and then they re-enter society after the war and take up various professions. While Hannibal is raised as an orphan, get this, you ready? He's raised as an orphan in his family's home. The manor that used to be Lecter Manor or whatever the fuck is now being used by the Soviets occupying this part of Germany as some kind of like reform school.
So he's in his own house. Does he know it's his house?
Yeah, he knows it's his own house. He knows it's his own house. Insofar that he knows secret passages and shit, and uses that to almost kill this little bastard who's like his bully. And then he sneaks into the headmaster's office, which was his parents' bedroom, and gets his mother's letters, I think they are, from a secret compartment in the mantle in the fireplace. And then and I think there's some jewels in there, some money, and then he flees to Western Germany, right? They were the not Soviet one.
West Germany.
I forget. Yeah, that was a good one, right? That was our Germany, right?
Yeah, I think so.
It's been a while. So he flees to Western Germany, and then, I couldn't make this shit up. Then travels to, I forget where, but he goes to his uncle's estate, finds that his uncle is dead, and is taken in by his uncle's wife, who is also a Japanese samurai woman. I shittest thou not. She has like a full set of fucking samurai armor and a sword, and teaches Hannibal to sword fight. She teaches Hannibal to sword fight.
Which he never does in any of the other books.
Martial arts and shit. And then he becomes a med student. And they go to France. She loses that's where they are. They're in the French countryside at his uncle's chateau. And then finances go sideways. They lose the chateau. They move to Paris. And he's a med student. And that's the thing. I mean, about a lot of these movies, they don't really show the killing very much. Now, we already talked about Manhunter / Red Dragon. The serial killer kills no one in that movie, story.
He kills the guy that
he kills the guy
that he thinks is with Reba.
Right, and that is like a final act thing in both movies. The serial killing that he actually does, the families he kills, before the movie starts. So you don't see it, you don't really see the murdering very much. you see Will Graham shoot the serial killer. In Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal kills several people when he escapes. But other than that, you don't see Buffalo Bill kill anyone. He abducts the senator's daughter.
Well, yeah, I mean, the story is about finding him before he does it again.
Obviously, right. But also, that's my point. Like, these stories aren't really structured to show off killings. Like, seeing Hannibal Lecter kill the guards, and, I mean, you only see him kill the 2 guards, right? You don't even see him kill the second guard. You see him kill the 1 guard, and then he kills the second guard off screen. You learn later. And then you hear that he killed the 2 people in the ambulance and that he killed a tourist and took his money and clothes and shit. So he kills 1 person on screen. That's 2 movies, 1 person killed on screen. 3 movies. Manhunter, Red Dragon, Silence of the Lambs. Hannibal.
He kills the pickpocket.
He stabs the pickpocket in the groin.
He kills
Inspector Pazzi.
The Italian inspector.
Yeah.
He kills Ray Liotta.
That's a bit bloodier, and there's a few guys get wasted at Verger's. He kills Mason Verger, pushes him into the pigs, and a couple of those dudes when he rescues Clarice. And Clarice whacks a bunch of people in the beginning of that movie. Remember, she gets a letter saying something like congratulating her for being the female FBI agent with the most kills.
Yeah, and it starts with like a gunfight.
Yeah, it's crazy. So that movie's an outlier, and you get this violence in Hannibal Rising that's very serial killer-y violence, very slow murders, that are intentionally gruesome. I mean, I dig it. Like, it's more of a horror movie, I think, than the previous 2 ventures. Hannibal and Red Dragon, I don't think, would you classify them as horror?
No, not at all.
I wouldn't.
It's an FBI in procedural, like investigation. It's like a whodunit almost.
Yeah, with serial killers. So Hannibal Rising tries to be much more evil, much more, because Hannibal's young, so he's vivacious, and he's just doesn't have a modus operandi yet, and he's doesn't know who he is yet. And the whole thing is he takes sodium pentothal. Like, remember they make this big deal about how Hannibal Lecter can't
He's
be
immune to
interrogated. Well, we find out that's because he's been doing it to himself for years. And the first time he takes it is when he's a med student and he steals some after seeing what it does to a collaborator being interrogated before being executed. And he takes some and remembers more about his trauma and the guys who ate his sister. Remembers their faces, and he remembers the bit about the dog tags. So he goes back to the ruined cottage because now I guess it's accessible. I think it was in Ukraine, I think. Yeah, or Lithuania. Yeah, I think he's Lithuanian. Finds the dog tags and then proceeds to hunt down all these dudes who ate his sister until the last one, who's like half a crime lord badass, who's, who the actor is? He's the kicker from the fucking Replacements. Nigel. I'm wiry. He's fucking wiry. Yeah, he's the big bad guy in this.
This movie sounds like a dumpster fire.
Dude, it is just so all over the place, man. I can't even... And, of course, it ends with him going to America.
Well, you know what's funny about it? Like, all these movies, they're trying to figure out what makes these guys do what they do. What makes them do what they do. And the scary part is that you don't know what made them that way. People spend a lifetime trying to figure it out. That's why, like the guy that wrote Mindhunter, and interviewed all this, he's trying to figure out what made them the way they are, and because no one has figured it out, and the fact that it's so mysterious, their backstory, like how they're made, like that's what drives these people. And then you take the notion that like there's no clear answer to what made them this way, and then you try to make a movie about it that explains everything down to a T of why he is the way, and it's just like, well, no one's been able to figure it out yet, what makes these people do what they do. Why now are we thinking we're going to figure out what makes Hannibal Lecter tick, like the craziest one of all of them? It just sounds dumb.
I think that's part of the allure of Hannibal Lecter, too, is that he is kind of, in a weird way, a window into that psychology. He's an interpreter, you know, because he's just sane enough to be able to explain it, but also insane enough to understand the motivation of someone like the Tooth Fairy or Buffalo Bill. But at the same time, he's operating on this other level where he's also just completely fucking with the FBI the whole time. Because the first time he's playing along with the Tooth Fairy shit, he doesn't give a shit about the Tooth Fairy either, but he'll fuck around and help them catch him because he wants a chance to kill Will Graham by proxy. Like, that's his entire goal in that movie, right?
He wants to get rid of him.
And in Silence of the Lambs, his entire goal is to get out of the asylum in some way so that he has an opportunity to escape. Period. That's his entire end game for fucking. I mean, he gets interested in Clarice and everything, yada yada, whatever.
It's like a fascination,
right? Yeah, but he sees an opening. Like when he realizes Jack Crawford sent a student from Quantico to him, he knows something is afoot, and he also knows that Crawford's desperate, that he can't catch this guy. And then when the senator's daughter is abducted, he knows it just ratchets up the pressure. And he knows that if he leans a little bit, it could give him the opportunity he needs. And also he has fun with Clarice. You know? I think he genuinely likes her in whatever fucked up way. Like they say it, there's no word for what Hannibal Lecter is. You know,
right.
He's not an amalgam of serial killers. There's really no serial killers in the real world very much like him at all.
Oh no,
even close. And I think this has also given people who don't become obsessed with real serial killers for a while and read about them. It gives them this impression that serial killers are more often than not intelligent, fastidious, cultured murderers. When in reality, they're people of all walks of life, which is more terrifying. Absolutely all walks of life, all levels of intelligence, all levels of planning, no planning. It runs the entire gamut. But Hannibal Lecter is very much a fiction, and that's why he's so fucking attractive. He's so interesting, you almost forgive the horrible shit he does. That's fucked up.
It is fucked up. You find yourself not like rooting for him, but you're fascinated to see what he's going to do next. It's like that morbid curiosity. It's like, well, how's he going to get out of this one, or how's he going to outsmart this person? And he is a very interesting character, and I purposely avoided that Hannibal Rising movie because, it's like I don't want to know anymore. It's like it's fine. Yeah. It's fine the way it is. Like, and I think I said this. You had asked me about Ghostbusters earlier. And I think like the more they make bad Hannibal stuff, the more it makes me appreciate Silence of the Lambs, and it like mythologizes it more and puts it on an even higher pedestal because there is so much other bad stuff that people tried to do to expand on it, and it just makes me like the original even more. And so, yeah, but there was a point I was like, I can't watch another Hannibal Lecter movie. Hannibal Rising. As soon as I was like, no, I'm done. This can't be good.
No, it's not. It's not. And I've seen it more than once because I wanted to give it a fair shake and all. But it's just not in a lot of ways. And this is just, we keep running into these things where, again, Silence of the Lambs was a very unique, very incredible movie that became a milestone of cinema. You can't make a sequel to something like that, man. Just like you can't remake it. Like, you can't do another adaptation of the book because you will never do it better. Nothing about Silence of the Lambs will ever need to be updated or remade. Mindhunter, you could have made the argument that was an extremely dated film.
Manhunter.
And God damn it, I keep doing that.
Yeah,
Manhunter.
I had the same thought too. You watch that and you're like, this is an 80s movie.
Right.
It's just right on down to the clothes and like the way they talk and stuff. And like even just like the decor. Oh, he's walking through that one house and it's got like the clear plastic railing. It's just so 80s version of modern that it hurts. But then you watch Silence of the Lambs and like you don't necessarily look at that as, you know, an 80s movie or a 90s movie. The only things that give it away are like the phones and the fax machines they're using. But everything else would fit very neatly into any decade if you can ignore the technology they're using. And it doesn't feel dated at all. It's really, I mean, timeless in a way. It doesn't feel boxed into any one decade.
To me, it feels very early 90s, but in the best way possible. Like, there's nothing in the plot relies on it when it takes place, you know? Other than, I mean, any movie before cell phones, you could argue cell phones may have made a difference. Fuck off, whatever. I mean, like we just said, and a really big part of the mystery in Red Dragon relies on a service that used to exist that transferred 35 millimeter home movies to videotape.
Oh, you don't need that anymore.
That's not a thing anymore. You'd have to completely write around that if you were making that movie in the present day. You know,
if you want to sew a lady suit for yourself, if you want to sew yourself a lady suit out of real skin, like, yeah, you could do that tomorrow.
Can I want to get real dark with you for a minute here.
You mean this hasn't been dark yet?
No, this has been fluffy. I like this shit.
Oh, boy.
I recently rewatched Lambs, and the sequence at the end when Clarice is going through the basement dungeon of Buffalo Bill, and it's just such a masterful sequence because we up till now we've had all these really tight shots and narrow shots of him and his house of horrors and the shit he's doing. And now Clarice is going like from room to room, discovering all this crazy shit and just seeing all of it, you know, in frame all at once, one after the other. It's fucking crazy.
It's like looking into his brain.
Yeah. It's like going through his what the fuck do they call it?
The id?
Not mind warehouse. That
mind palace.
Technique, mind palace, that memorization technique. Yeah. And that's a big thing in the Hannibal series, but we'll get to that. Yeah, it's like she's kicking down the doors in his mind palace, and one of those doors she kicks down, and you see his in progress lady suit.
Oh,
it's a suit sewn together of human skin from different parts of different women. You know this because there's a boob, like there's a very prominent boob. And a shoulder, like otherwise, you know, it's only shown for a second or two, you know, and a lot of people miss it. A lot of people actually miss this.
I miss it too because, like, at that part, I'm kind of like, you know, squinting, like, ooh, like you're kind of you kind of
yeah.
scrunch up your face if you're bracing for something, like you know it's gonna be fucked up. Like I'm usually making that face when she's going door to door.
Well, I paid, for some reason, I paid a lot of attention to that shot this time, and it struck me. It's kind of insane that he wanted boobs from different women. Like, if you're going to do the boob section of your female skin suit, don't you think you take the whole boob section from one victim? So you got a matching set?
Were they different?
Or like, there was only one. He hadn't gotten the other one yet. Presumably, this poor woman in the pit was going to be donating her left titty to the skin suit. But I don't...
you don't know that. Maybe he just hadn't put the other one on yet.
Yeah, maybe it was like hanging out on the wall.
I don't know, Dave. I've never considered this angle of this.
Well, what kind of a fan are you, man? What the fuck kind of fan are you?
Yeah,
Hey,
yeah,
did you,
I'm just
do you
a
know?
tourist.
I want to ask you, have you ever noticed this other grotesque thing in the famous Goodbye Horses scene when he's dancing, he tucks his junk back?
Yeah.
Right? Did you notice that his wig is actually a woman's
it's a scalp. I did notice that. It's fucking
Some
terrifying.
people miss that too. It's fucked up. On videotape, it was kind of hard to tell back in the day.
Oh, I just watched it in
I remember,
HD.
Yeah, I remember not noticing that for a while. Maybe until I saw it on DVD. Who the fuck knows? But yeah, that adds another layer to that scene.
That scene,
it's pretty fucked up.
Well, yeah, again, it's like it's a very fucked up scene, but I always laugh a little bit just because, going back to the name of this podcast, Mr. Falcon. I watched that movie on TV more than once, and they do that part where they're close up on his mouth and he's saying like, "Would you
fuck
Ted Levine
me?
in that awful voice of his? Would you fuck me? Would you fuck me?
I'd fuck me hard.
And it's on TV."
So hard.
And he can't say that, so he's like, "Would you have me?"
Is that what they did it?
Yeah, he
have
goes,
me?
Would you have me? I'd have me so hard, and you could just hear where they cut it in, and it's not a funny scene. It's meant to like unnerve you, but then you watch it on TV,
Yeah, that fucks it up.
and they put that in there, and it's like that's all I can focus on. Like, never mind the fact that he tucked his wang back and they have to like crop that out. Never mind that he's wearing someone else's like lady hair still on the scalp. He says,
That's okay though.
Would
We
you
can show
have
that.
me? And like that's all I can focus on because it's like, hey, that's not the same.
You'd think they would have used love at least or something like, would you love me? I'd love
Well, I
me.
mean, like have me
I'd
means
love me so hard.
it means the same thing, I guess.
I guess, man. I guess. But he's a gem in that movie. Like, I just, so unintentionally hilarious.
wait.
Was she a great big fat person?
Yeah, she was a big girl.
That aside, that his delivery aside, that scene is so good. Again, I mean, you could just go every fucking scene in this movie, but the back and forth with him and Clarice as she slowly realizes as she looks around his crazy, dirty house that this is the fucking dude she's been looking for this whole time. Like, you can see it all clicking into place behind her eyes. And the moment that there's no going back, she's fucking in danger. You see, and then she flicks off the thumb brake on her pistol. And you're like, oh shit, she knows. And after the misdirection of her showing up at his door and you think that Jack Crawford's going to bust him. Dude, just epic shit. There isn't a moment like that in any of the following movies.
No.
Like people talk about the brain scene with Ray Liotta at the end of Hannibal.
That was just gross.
It makes me laugh. Ray Liotta is so fucking funny in that scene that I can't do anything but laugh. Like, I know it's fake. Like, nothing about it makes me even think that it might be real. I don't know if that's even possible because I'm not a doctor. So I don't know how awake a person can be when their skull cap is removed. So I have no basis for
It's
it. You know
too
what I mean?
fantastical.
Yeah,
Whereas,
it's too out there.
in contrast, what's more real than just the abject fear that you're in the room with a crazed killer, and you have to deal with him, whether you like it or not. He could kill you.
And then you're plunged into complete darkness.
That hell maze that he has down in the basement.
Yeah, you think that you have at least the advantage that you're armed and chasing him. And then all of a sudden you're plunged into complete darkness and you don't know it, but he's got a giant fucking 44 Magnum and he's like 2 feet away from you and you don't know it. And then switching to the POV through the night vision, just epic. Every fucking scene in that movie is epic. They should have never tried to follow up. It was too many years later. Hannibal was a shitty book, and they should have just left it as a fucking book, man. But I can't blame Anthony Hopkins. I'm sure they offered him a monstrous payday, and he fucking took it. Good for him, man. Good for Jodie Foster for not taking it. But every movie after that was a mistake. What they should have done then was remake Manhunter, remake Red Dragon within 2 years after Silence of the Lambs. That is the only thing that I think would have made sense and would have produced possibly a quality sequel / prequel to Silence of the Lambs. But at the same time, I still think it would have come off hokey if you tried to follow Silence of the Lambs with Jodie Foster and Anthony Hopkins that soon, because it was so big and so popular. Like, how do you make a sequel to that without making fun of yourself?
It ended
or becoming
well,
a parody.
too.
It's great ending.
They
Great
ended
ending.
that movie really well. And
again, I don't need someone to explain to me what happens to Hannibal Lecter after that ending. Like you just said, you don't want to hear where Hannibal Lecter came from, right? I don't.
No, it's so much more interesting to just not know. And like the most interesting parts about those movies are him toying with a character, and by extension the audience, and so to know more about him, I think makes him less interesting, if that makes sense.
And yeah, and imagining what he was like as a psychiatrist who killed people, as a serial killer, it's a lot of fun, all that said, you have this small library of novels about this character, right? The idea that you can go back and retread this ground from a different perspective and different angles as a TV show and really dwell with these characters is something I never would have thought possible. But the Hannibal show is really something special.
I've heard that from multiple people. I
really should check it out, man.
Yeah, I gotta figure out how to watch it.
Oh, I think I think we have it on our secret server.
Yeah. Okay. Good to
I do believe
know.
it's on there. I will tell you, every season is like drastically different. The first season is very almost Twin Peaks-esque, and it's very a little Cronenberg. It's a little esoterical. It's a lot of imagery. And it makes sense at the end because you find out the main character, his brain isn't okay. So it all makes sense in the end. But the first season requires a little patience, and then the pace rapidly quickens through the next 2 seasons. And knowing the movies, and knowing the characters in them is it's a lot of fun because you keep seeing these familiar characters who all kind of have the same setups, but everything's tweaked a little bit. Like the relationships are a little different, or they combined two storylines into one and changed when it happens. But they took such care with it that it all absolutely works. And Mads Mikkelsen as Hannibal Lecter is something completely different than any idea we've had of him before.
I like Mads
books and the
Mikkelsen.
movies. He's fantastic, man. Like, you think he's a little wooden at first, but he's just really subtle. And he's devilish. Like, he plays Hannibal Lecter like he's a character that literally knows he's looking 20 moves ahead as if he's playing chess, but he's doing it with everyone in his entire ecosystem. And he's almost precognitive, but not to a supernatural degree. Like, things still unexpectedly happen, but it's his basic motivation is he fucks with people just to see what they'll do. He fucks with people he finds interesting to see how they will react when he puts them in extremely distressing situations. And it's terrifying in a very lovable way.
Lovable?
Yeah.
Wait a minute. He makes Hannibal Lecter lovable?
Dude, I can't even explain how much weird slash fiction there is out there about love stories between Hannibal and Will Graham. Like, gay-ass love stories. They're fantastic.
Oh, boy.
Just, it's a trip, man. Like, this show flirts with so much weird shit. Like, dark relationships, dark feelings. Like, Will Graham is such a wonderfully fleshed out character. If you like what Bill Peterson did with him, you'll really like this version of him, because he's the definition of wounded and damaged.
It's interesting to hear that, because like I said, I couldn't stand the Ed Norton version, and the William Peterson one I liked, but it was still pretty one note. Like the performance was fine, but the character arc did nothing for me. Like, he's the same at the end as he was at the beginning. So if you're telling me that they have all this like material to play with and you get to flesh that character out, yeah, that sounds interesting. I'll check that out.
Yeah, dude. And the first season very much is kind of like a serial killer of the week story until you get to the end, because it's all about Will Graham in his heyday helping Jack Crawford track down serial killers.
With the help of Hannibal Lecter?
With the help of Hannibal Lecter. And now look at it this way. Look at it this way, too, going into it. This does not take place in the real world. Like, this is not meant to be grounded in reality the way Silence of the Lambs was grounded in reality. This takes place in a hyper-realistic serial killer world, if you will. So suspend your disbelief about that, because it's not trying to be a procedural. So the FBI stuff, they make a good effort at it, but it's ridiculous. Like, the legal stuff is all ridiculous. But that's par for the course for a show, right? And the movies, too. You know, like, cops and FBI agents, they shoot people all the time, then they keep working. That just doesn't happen in the real world.
Yeah, they're at work the next day.
Yeah, and bitching about paperwork, or we'll get someone else to do it. Rah, it's nonsense. But that you very much get the point from the very first episode of the show that that's not what this is trying to be. This is kind of like a whimsical, dark fairy tale about serial killers and love. Just not necessarily romantic love, just love and attachment between people. And it's also about one of the most devious minds that fiction can kind of think up. And gore. They show very few actual murders in the show on screen, but you see I don't even know what to call it.
The aftermath.
You see the aftermath, but you'll also see okay, so there's one serial killer who kills a couple people in a snowy field, right? What you see of the murder consists of very tight shots of blood splattering slowly over snow, right? And maybe a bloody hand unflexing, as the person dies, and something in the background moving out of focus. So it's very dreamlike. The whole season is very dreamlike, and parts of the show are very dreamlike. So it doesn't emphasize the violence. It's all about the motivation. And
It's like an impression of violence.
Yeah, it's the fantasy. It's about the fantasy in the killer's head and in Hannibal's head. And it's about food. Did I mention that?
No.
It has some of the most beautiful food footage ever that you'll ever see.
Roll that beautiful bean footage.
There's so many scenes of Hannibal cooking. Parts of people, regular food, all but like the most gourmet shit. And they dig into food history to find some of the rarest, weirdest, most niche recipes from French cooking, from Italian, all kinds of shit. And he always has these cool little explanations and analogies and stuff. It's easy to make fun of after you've watched the entire show, and you get the breadth of how many times he's done this, but it's really mostly confined to the first season. Man, you got to see it though. It's just, I never would have imagined that I don't have that kind of organizational brain to keep all those pieces together and also be such a fan of the source material. They picked all the right shit to emphasize and use, and they discarded all the crap. And they just really made an awesome new version of stories that we knew really well. They retell the Tooth Fairy story in the third season.
Okay.
With a new dollar hide, the tattoo, the whole bit, and they keep all the important parts without fucking up their overall narrative, and they change what they have to change, and that character ends up being the catalyst for the ending of the show, for the finale, and it's awesome, dude. And it actually turned out to be a blessing that they couldn't use any of the characters from Silence of the Lambs, because it kept them from sullying. It's kept them from trying to imitate the movie. And it kept them from producing an inferior version of that story. And it also made them get inventive to write around some stuff. And I think it worked. And you really got to check it out.
I'm sold. It sounds awesome. I've heard that from people, and I never had a way to watch it. So, since we're on the topic, and I do need something to watch. TV has failed me lately, so back to the archive.
Yeah, no shit. Absolutely. Well, the good thing is that there's a lot of good stuff in the back catalog, man, that I know you've missed, because there's stuff I've missed, and I'm making cool discoveries all the time. Yeah, and that's a great show that it ended in 2015, and for years fans tried to rally and get it to come back, but honestly it may not have been the run that the showmakers were intending, but it ended on a good note in a good place. And
you got to let that
package happen. Yeah, so what you're left with is a really good story. I mean, it's only 3 seasons long, but it's a lot. It's a lot. And there's a lot of great supporting cast. Michael Pitt plays Mason Verger, pre-face cutting, and I'm going to blank on her name, but the woman from Ginger Snaps.
Oh, I have no idea.
Yeah, she's in it. She's excellent. She's Mason's sister, Margot. She's fantastic, and she's in this, which she wasn't in either movie, which is fucking ridiculous. Here's something you're gonna like. The dude who played the killer in True Detective season 1.
Oh yeah, that guy. He's creepy.
He's Mason Verger's like butler, Cordell.
That guy's huge, right?
He's pretty big, yeah. He's creepy as fuck in the show. Creepy as hell. So is Mason Verger, and I don't know how much I like this or not, but the makeup is pretty similar to the movie, to Hannibal, to what they did for Gary Oldman, and it's almost like the actor is doing an impression of Gary Oldman's version of the character, but he's so good at it, I don't care.
Okay.
I'm all right with it. And for a TV show, the makeup looks pretty fucking good. And I can't really think parts of it are going to make you laugh, but it's so dark and heavy that you're grateful for it. And just some of the crazy serial killer shit that they come up with for the first season, it's just like, you wonder what the writing room was like, if they were throwing shit at a dartboard or what. But some of the stuff they came up with was pretty fucking wild, man. So, yeah, go for it, Go for it. I'd love to hear what you think as you make your way through it if you decide to.
Yeah, I'm in. I'll check it out. It's just I got to find time to do it, but it sounds pretty cool. I've been interested in it for a while.
Cool, man. Cool. All right. Well, that's pretty much it. I don't know if I have anything else. I just Silence of the Lambs all the way for me, man. It's a lot to go through.
I'm with you on Silence of the Lambs. It's an all-time great. It's one of the best to ever do it, and it had some really bad stuff come out of it, some goofy stuff. But again, it just makes the original seem even better. Not that I want them to keep making bad Hannibal stuff, but we always have that one to go back to.
Yeah, and I think if anyone is looking to get into this series of films and hasn't seen it yet, I'd encourage you just to watch Silence of the Lambs first. Watch it on its own, and then if you're still into the story, I'd encourage you to watch Manhunter. It was made before Silence of the Lambs. The story takes place before Silence of the Lambs. It kind of works that way. And other than the ending, which is a bit abrupt and truncated, it's a pretty cool fucking time capsule of a movie. If you are still really into the characters and you want more of this universe, just go watch the show. Like, I can't even advocate watching the other 3 films if you haven't seen them already.
Well, if you're a masochist and you really hate,
they're not that bad.
You hate how happy you are with your life, and you
they're
really
not unwatchable though.
You want to make things miserable, go watch Hannibal Rising.
Yeah, Hannibal Rising is fucking awful. Like that's just bad. Skip that. Like, if you are gonna watch the other ones, like if you saw Manhunter, you don't really have to watch Red Dragon again. If you really don't want to. So go ahead, watch Hannibal. It's a fucking Ridley Scott movie. You should watch all of Ridley Scott's movies anyway, even though I think he's really overrated. But that's a longer podcast, and
that's another conversation.
So yeah, like that's the score, man. That's the score with this awesome character and Silence of the Lambs, which is an incredible movie and a really great and underrated and underappreciated horror show. And there's not that many shows that fit into that category of horror, and you have one in Hannibal. So I hope you check it out. And that's it, man.
All righty.
Hello, Clarice. So nice to see you again.
Good evening, Clarice.
I'm having an old friend for dinner. You know what's funny? A little bit of trivia on the way out as we bring up the music.
Yeah.
In the very first time when Clarice and Lecter are talking, he drops a hint as to where the serial killer lives, where Buffalo Bill lives. He tells her that the drawing on the wall is the Duomo seen from the Belvedere.
The Belvedere,
Hotel.
Ohio.
Belvedere, Ohio is where she finds him. Yep. And that was in their very first conversation. And you know it wasn't an accident. He doesn't do anything by accident.
No.
That's Hannibal, man. 5D chess.
That's
He's the
Hannibal
Elon
for you.
Musk of serial killers.
Classic
Yeah, man.
Hannibal.